Thank you very much. Councilmember Birsan.
I have some questions.
Okay, we do. City Clerk Joelle Faulkner, you have Eddie Birsan's questions for this item.
The situation is this. Mohammed and Maria Gomez parked their car in Todos Santos. An auto plate reader goes by. I have 5 questions to ask you about this. Where does that information go exactly?
That data is downloaded into our into a database we have at the police department, and then ultimately collected by the county, a county database called ARIES, and it's delivered to that database system.
Will someone outside of the Concord PD have that information?
Only those that have access to the ARIES system, so it would be county law enforcement officials.
Your report says that organizations outside of the PD can get access to the information in PD. How is that request handled?
Well, they would get information through the ARIES database, so that would be, again, county law enforcement agencies. Any requests that would come through us would ultimately go through our custodian of records, as any other law enforcement requests would come through.
Are organizations given blanket access to the database, such as the FBI or Highway Patrol?
Only organizations that have access to our county database would get access to that, and again, they would have to have a reason to do it through a criminal investigation, that type of thing.
If there is not a blanket access, then who specifically does the screening of the request?
To log into the system, it's tracked, so it'll show who it is that logged into the system and for what reason. And then certainly any request that came specifically through the police department would be screened again by that custodian of records that would take that would take in that request.
And what is that person's training on reasonable search and seizure?
Whatever training they would normally have, again, for the request of police records, such as police reports and that kind of thing, would fall under the same category.
How is the request received? Court order or direct request?
Could be either. Normally, if it's from a police agency, it would be a direct request.
And who pays for that screener, and what is his training specifying is a reasonable search?
Well, that would be somebody, again, that's already employed by the police department, again, that custodian of records, and then whatever training they would have in regards to release of police records.
Going back to the points in our situation and the answers so far, some more points. Will you give information to ICE, and how do we screen those requests?
Normally, ICE requests come through detention, so they wouldn't have access to our database. Again, it has to be a police agency that has a link to some type of a criminal investigation.
Last one.
Okay.
Should the federal government start to register all Muslims and a request is made by the FBI for the daily locations of all people with the first name Mohammed, what do you do?
Again, the information wouldn't be released because it has to be related to a criminal investigation.
Councilmember Birsan, those were your questions.
Yes.
I just want to make sure.
One additional one.
Okay.
Can you list the organizations that have access to ARIES at the Sheriff's Department?
It would be all the police departments in the county. So, not that I know of, no.
Okay, any other questions? I have one. License plate readers aren't that new of technology. I mean, they've been out there for a little while. Other agencies are using them. Are there other cities in our region that are already utilizing this technology?
Yes, several of the local agencies surrounding us do utilize this technology currently.
Do you have a couple of the names?
I know Walnut Creek, Pittsburgh, Martinez, they all have them.
Okay. And they've been using them without any issues, I guess? I mean, I didn't know they had them, so I guess.
Yes, that's correct.
And then the license plate readers, you talked about the training the staff has, and you talked about some of the other expertise that they have. But is this basically somebody that's like CLETS trained? Is that what we're talking about? That would be
That's part of
of
it.
the same?
It has to do with a lot of the access to the information.
Because that's all
parallel.
secured in terms of nobody from the public can get that information. You have to be specialized in terms of some sort of credential, or it has to be related to a case and go through the normal procedures of review. I can't just walk in there and say, give me some information that's on your computer database on this person at this house, or this driver's license plate, or this license number. It all has to go through the CLETS, which identifies who that person is that's logging in and why they're making that request for the information. That's all kept in records, so you can make sure that it's all being done in accordance with the law.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions from the council? Councilmember Birsan.
When they log in, they don't get access right away. Is that correct?
You log in with your login information and password, and then with a reason for the request, and then you would have access to the system.
I thought there was someone who screens the access.
No, we audit the access. The access is audited, but initially you can get in and look for the information.
So they can come in without any explanation. What do you do when you find out in your audit that, hey, it wasn't a reasonable search? What do you do?
That would then go back to the agency that made the request,
The
and
damage is done.
you'd have to investigate it.
Is there any way you can institute a check before they get the data?
That would be difficult because you'd have to know what it is, the data that they would be looking for, that you would want.
That's why we have rules that say reasonable search. It doesn't say reasonable 4-week later discovery. So if you've trained someone in search, that reasonableness has to come before the search, not after.
Okay.
Maybe I can
Chief.
Yeah, maybe I can help out a little bit. First off, this database where the information is going, the only ones accessing it are law enforcement. So your question is, somebody comes in, they put the information in, I believe the mayor is making reference. Somebody has to go in, put their information, log in, and then they have to list the specific reason why they're accessing it. So if somebody did go in and lie about why they're accessing it, then there would be an internal investigation on that individual who accessed information. That would get triggered, which we do audits for. There is no search and seizure here because it's a police department database. So there is no seizing going on. It's basically a database. It's just a search of information. And the only information they're searching is that car was parked at that location at that time. That's all they're doing. There's nothing else suspicious about it. Just simply said is this car was logged, the license plate was logged on this vehicle at that location on this date and that time. That's the only information they're given out of that database.
And what if I think that's an unreasonable question for my government to ask?
I think you're entitled to
But I can't question it, can I?
yeah, you can question it.
You've already given the information.
No, you can question it.
Only if I
Database
find out.
doesn't exist, right?
Are you going to notify everyone who's had their information given? No, you're not, because you're police.
Yes. But once again, this is for law enforcement purposes. This isn't for the general public.
That's right. I'm the general public.
Okay, we're getting into a debate versus questions and answers here, and there may be philosophical differences of opinion, and that's fine.
This
But
this is simply a Senate bill requirement, which is
to do this, to provide this information in a public session. That's why I was asking if there's other cities, because I thought there were. I didn't realize Walnut Creek. So if I go into Walnut Creek and park, I could very well be subject to this now, or in Pittsburgh or some of these other communities, or Danville, or wherever may have license plate readers already in operation. So
that's correct.
anybody going into any of those communities already have it. We also have the technology. We're required by law to come forward under this new bill to present all this information publicly and the policy publicly.
Right, that's correct. There are cities in the Bay Area that for years have had stationary license plate readers that any time you entered their city, they were capturing your information. We don't do that. We simply have cars driving around recording for stolen vehicles, for vehicles wanted. That's primarily what it's used for. So that's basically for law enforcement purposes.
Yeah, I think there's a city across the bay in Marin County, Sausalito. They have the plate reader when you come in. They know when you're entering the community and when you're exiting the community.
Correct.
And this isn't that type of
No, it's not.
program. Councilmember Grayson.
Yes, Chief, just to clarify, first of all, only sworn have access to this database.
That's correct.
And even then, the policies are so strict that sworn aren't just at freelance able to go and search the database. they literally have to have a reason. For instance, I can't go to an officer and say, I have a friend, here's this license plate number, look it up for me. That's against policy.
That's correct.
So if I understand it correctly, not only is it private from public, it's also private from sworn, and the sworn have to show reasonable search cause for being able to search the database. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If you're worried about privacy, you probably ought not to carry a cell phone.
Right, and it's a reminder too, is that every time you cross the bridge, it's doing this. It's taking your picture and capturing your plate. Every time you go to your ATM, every time you walk into a convenience store, there's this digital recording of you taking place. This is just one we use for only specific law enforcement purposes, and that's it.
And how long have the units been in operation here?
We've had them since 2008 when we got our first
2008.
couple, yeah, and then we've gotten some since then.
And we've been following basically, to some extent, this procedure. We now just have to go forward and do it in a public session. So any complaints or any issues, as Councilmember Birsan brought up, some examples and some concerns he had that we've had since 2008 in its operation.
We've always had a database that you had to log into to get the information. We've had no problems with it since its inception in 2008.
Okay.
The only question we were ever asked was about 4 years ago by the ACLU, asked how long we kept the data. And in our policy, we keep it for 6 months, which is standard for Aries and every other law enforcement. And it's disposed of.
Okay. Vice Mayor Leone.
No, I just was going to point that out.
Okay. You anticipated the question. Councilmember Birsan.
If you keep it for 6 months, how long does the sheriff keep it?
6 months.
And what about everyone who has access to the sheriff's stuff?
6 months,
And you know that for sure.
because it's part of Aries. Aries is the county network of law enforcement. So if it goes into Aries and they're accessing it via Aries, it's 6 months. So
Okay. No other questions from the council at this point. I will go ahead and ask, before we bring it back to the council for an action, if there's any comments from the public on this matter. It's a consideration item for the city council. Okay, seeing nobody come forward, I'll bring it back to the city council. What's the pleasure of the council on agenda item 10A, which is the department policy for the automatic light plate readers?
So move.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Councilmember Birsan is
I have a
opposed.
statement.
That passes 4-1 with Councilmember
I
Birsan
have a
opposed.
statement.
Excuse me, Matt.
I have a
Are you
statement.
opposed or abstaining?
I'm opposed, and I have a statement for
Okay,
the
I
discussion part.
Okay. We took action on it, so would you like to make your statement at this time on this item?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. City Clerk. I didn't know you had it.
I have pledged allegiance to liberty and justice for all, as well as to uphold the Constitution. Therein is the phrase that government shall not participate in unreasonable search. The words unreasonable and justice give me great pause in reviewing this measure. While our society moves with light speed in the sacrifice of privacy in the name of expediency and downloadable computer and phone applications, the advances of the reach of the government through the access and eventual storage of metadata should not be encouraged. Compulsion to surrender on the basis of mass acceptance of these intrusions, be it in the name of convenience, so-called security, or fear, is not a reasonable response. I therefore must not vote no on this measure.